Today on Girl Read Your Bible, we are talking about David and Goliath, one of the most famous stories in the Bible. This is a story people know. Even if you never went to church at all, you still heard of the story of David and Goliath. And people know like a few sentences worth, a summary of this story as a general rule. People tend to know David and Goliath, big giant man and a tiny little boy, and he beat the big scary giant with just a slingshot and triumphed. That's it. We could wrap it up right there in less than a minute. That's the story of David and Goliath. But friends, we are deeper than that. We want to know how this story impacts our life today. And there are so many abundant, amazing takeaways from the life of David. And I want to make sure that you are getting the big picture so that it can improve and empower your life right now, so that you can see all the things that God is trying to show you through this incredible story. So we are going to read through the story of David and Goliath today, and we are going to talk a lot about David, the boy who will become king. David is one of these incredible people that we get to so much from throughout the Bible, because we get to see so much of his life. When his story starts for us, he's probably somewhere around 12, and we get to see the entirety of his life unto death. And so he's a very, very important person in history, especially because he is still to this day like the noted king, right? Like they still reference King David, the star, the Jewish star, is the Star of David, right? There's so many historical, important, relevant things that come from David. And so to start off on his story, I got to lay a little foundation work for you, because I want to make sure you know where we're at in the order of things. And it's important to know that David is not, very important to know that David is not the first king of Israel. Now, if you've been following with me for a while, you know we went through Moses and the Exodus. We went through Judges, some of Judges. Please read it all for yourself, because that was God's plan and design, was to have judges over the land. He did not want Israel to have a king, but Israel is whining and begging for a king. They want to be, and they literally say, we want to be like the other nations and have a king who will judge us and lead us into battle, right? And make military decisions for us and all that stuff. We want to be like everyone else. And God is repeatedly, for a long time now, keeps telling them, I have set you apart. I want you to look different. I want to be your king, and I want the structure to look like this. I want you to just honor me, but you never do. And you keep going back to this idol worship, and you continually ask for ridiculous things, and you were just missing the big picture altogether. I mean, reading through it, you can really start to understand the frustration of God, because he keeps doing these incredible things and taking care of everything, and then just keeps getting betrayed. And we can relate to that, right? We can relate to that as maybe through our jobs, maybe through parenting, maybe through our friendships and relationship. We can relate to, I've done my best. I keep showing up for these people, fill in the blank of what people, and they continually turn their back on me and betray me. And then he gets frustrated and it's like, fine, have at it. It's a back and forth to read through to this point. And it's going to continue to be this back and forth. But God's like, fine. And he literally says that to Samuel, the prophet at the time, the judge and prophet. And he says, that's fine. Give them what they want. They don't listen to me anyway. Give them what they want. And so I want you to read that for yourself. That's the first 15 chapters of 1 Samuel. That's where we're reading out of today, 1 Samuel. And they anoint Saul to be king. And Saul is very tall and very handsome. And so that makes him uniquely qualified to be king. I don't know. That's it. They anoint him and choose him as king. And God condones that. But he says, but warn them, it's going to cause generational problems for generations if you make this decision. And the people were like, that's fine. This is what we want. And so he's like, then let them have it. And so then Saul's doing well for a time period, and then Saul doesn't honor God and doesn't listen to God, and God is very upset, and he removes his blessing from Saul. And he says to Samuel, Samuel is mourning this decision. Samuel is sad over the change in Saul's heart and that he hasn't been a good king in Israel, that he has changed, and he is literally in mourning. And so chapter 16 starts with God saying, "You have mourned for Saul long enough. I have chosen a new man that will be my king, a new guy. And you're going to go down and anoint him." And that is a wonderful chapter. I want you to read, because it's how he finds and chooses David. And I'm just going to summarize for you, because again, I want you to read it for yourself. But what's really cool is that David has several older brothers. And when Samuel arrives at the house to anoint Jesse's sons, that would be David's father too, David is tending the sheep. He's the youngest brother, and he is out tending sheep, and they don't even call him into the house for this visit and for this anointing. They don't remember him. I could go down a whole rabbit trail with that, just this part of the story, but I want you to know the background because I think it's relevant. They don't even think to call David in for this important encounter with this. Samuel was essentially the leader of the people. I mean, runs different. He's not a king, but he's the judge. He's the voice of God. He's the voice of a prophet. He's the voice of God to the people. He's a very highly significant person. They don't call David in from the fields. They leave him out there. And I think that's incredibly telling about how David was viewed in his own family. But as it turns out, he is the one that Samuel was sent there to anoint. And he's anointed in front of his entire family. And the Lord comes on him, and the favor of the Lord comes on him. And it's just an incredible thing. And that's a very valuable and important thing, because there's like, if you're just reading it and you don't know yet, there's just so many things to know about David and David's heart. I also want you to know that David is responsible for writing over half of the book of Psalms. And that's a lot of poetry, a lot of songs and music, but it's just the philosophy of dealing with the emotions. And there's so much real spiritual connection in deeply reading the Psalms. Because you see highs and lows, you see so much human emotion, you see great joy, you see great depression, you see just the struggle of humanity really reflecting in the different chapters of Psalm. And it's really beautiful, especially the ones with joy. The ones with depression, you're just like, oh, I can relate to feeling down in the dumps, right? And then the ones with joy are like, good, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And so David also was a man of deep emotions. He has a lot of real highs and lows, but his heart, this is why I love David. And I know it's so important to understand who he is and his story, because David is so loved by God. He's even referring to, here's a man after my own heart. Here's the apple of my eye, right? Like, God says such kind, complimentary things about David that there's so much that we need to learn from him so that we can find that peace in ourselves. I don't want to say become him, because I am big on become who you're created to be, not become someone else. But there's always examples to follow. There's always inspirations from other people to be like, yes, I want to grow in that characteristic more. And I do want to grow in many of the characteristics of David. And I feel like I relate, because frankly, friends, in complete honesty and being very vulnerable with you here, my highs and lows are unregulated sometimes. I battle depression. And some days I lose that battle, and some days I win victoriously, and some days I am full of joy and eager and happy, and other days I am having a hard time, like a really hard time. And I feel like very comforted knowing and reading through Psalms, because I know that David, who was highly favored of God, also felt these strong emotional peaks and valleys, and God would still be with him, and that God would still restore his soul and refresh him, and that those types of feelings were not wrong in any way or sinful in any way. They're just the way he was built. And I identify with that. We'll say it like that. I relate to that in any case. So I really love going through and reading about David and all of his journeys. His book, these several books. There's just a long story, right? There's a lot that goes on, a lot of time period. We're not going to go through all that together, but I would love for you to read it for yourself, because there's a lot of battles. There's a lot of details. There's a lot of things to know. And everything that's written has some nugget for us, has something to learn for us. And so that is an incredibly beautiful thing. But we're going to start at the beginning of David's story, where I told you he was already anointed, but now we get to see him really show up in a call to action. And one of the most famous and incredible Bible stories. We are going to start reading 1 Samuel chapter 17, the story of David and Goliath. Goliath challenges the Israelites. The Philistines now mustered their army for battle and camped between this place that's name is very complicated. Saul countered by gathering his Israelite troops near the valley of Elah, E-L-A-H, however you want to pronounce it. I am bad with that. So the Philistines and the Israelites faced each other on opposite sides of the hill, with the valley between them. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel, and he was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat weighed 125 pounds. Whew, that's heavy. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. A javelin is kind of like a spear, I think. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam. I don't know what that specifically means, friends, but I'm telling you, it's really heavy and really big, and they really want you to get a really beautiful picture. Tipped with iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. So just the spearhead of this javelin was 15 pounds. I mean, there's a lot going on here. I mean, wow, he's a big guy. He's really strong. They want you to really, really get a full picture of this 9-foot behemoth of a man. Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. "Why are you all coming out to fight?" he called. "I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. And if he kills me, we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me." When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. Full picture, guys, because it's just setting a scene for you of understanding. There's been a lot of fighting. We didn't get into that if you've been reading from the beginning. There's a lot of back and forth. The Philistines are always like this huge enemy for the Israelites. They're always coming after them. There's, sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. There's all this back and forth. It's crazy. In any case, this is a terrifying situation they're in. First of all, war anyway, and all these constant battles. There's so much battling over the next several books here. It's crazy. But in any case, the idea of this giant coming out and like threatening them and he has so much confidence, right? So like on top of the fact that they're already afraid of battle and all of this stuff, the fact that this one guy comes out so confident is just sending terror through the ranks. And he's saying, just send one guy. We don't need to all fight this out. We don't need to have a big battle. We're just gonna one-on-one here. Just the two of us. And just send me anyone. I defy you. I defy the armies of Israel. Well, that's quite a statement. And that statement is the one that's going to get him into quite big trouble, because that's the statement David hears, and he sees it differently. And we want to keep reading. It's very important. We're on verse 12. Now, David was the son of a man named Jesse, an Ephrathite from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. That's why these are such significant names. I know you've heard Bethlehem. I know you've heard Judah. And this is why. This is where the line of Jesus is coming from. And we're just seeing glimpses of how powerful and important that is. I'm sorry. Side note, keep reading. Jesse was an old man at the time, and he had 8 sons. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had already joined Saul's army to fight the Philistines, and David was the youngest son. David's 3 oldest brothers stayed with Saul's army, but David went back and forth so that he could help his father with the sheep in Bethlehem. And for 40 days, every morning and evening, the Philistine champion strutted in front of the Israelite army. One day, Jesse said to David, "Take this basket of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread and carry them quickly to your brothers. And give them these 10 cuts of cheese, and give these 10 cuts of cheese to their captain, and see how your brothers are getting along, and bring me back a report on how they're doing." And David's brothers were with Saul and the Israelite army at the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. So David left the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts as Jesse had directed him. He arrived at the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for the battlefield with shouts and battle cries. Soon the Israelite and Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies and hurried out to the ranks to greet his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, came out from the Philistine ranks, and then David heard him shout his usual taunt to the army of Israel. As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. "Have you seen the giant?" the men asked. "He comes out each day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him. He will give that man one of his daughters for a wife, and the man's entire family will be exempt from paying taxes." That's a sweet deal right there. David asked the soldiers standing nearby, "What will a man get for killing this Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel? Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" And these men gave David the same reply, and they said, "Yes, that is the reward you will get for killing him." That is the reward for killing him, sorry. But when David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard David talking to the men, he was angry. "What are you doing here anyway?" he demanded. "What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and deceit. You are just here to see the battle." "What have I done now?" David replied. "I was only asking a question." He walked over to some others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer. Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sent for him. And we are going to pause and talk about, because it's real easy to just read through that, and it was interesting and a good story, but I don't want you to miss some of the really important things here, because there are some really important things. First of all, David's father sends him with gifts and food and to go and bring him back a report. He gives him an assignment. And David goes out and honors that assignment. And he takes care of his business. He makes sure that somebody else is watching after his sheep. So he's a responsible person. I don't want you to miss some of the details that are laid out for us here. And when David gets there, he hears about he hears this giant. He hears this giant man come out and terrify the armies of Israel. And David is young. And he has that blessing of naivete, right? Sometimes I wish I remember when I was more naive, actually, and it was such a blessing. And I want to, I feel like this is going to come out wrong, but I'm going to say it anyway. And hopefully you'll understand where I'm trying to get. His faith came, oh man, it just feels wrong to say his faith came easier. It was like that's why Jesus tells us to be like little children. Because for little children, faith does seem to come easier. And David has still got this overwhelming confidence. I want you to know that David is going to continue to be this incredibly confident person. He's just going to have highs and lows of moral failure and highs and lows of joy and depression. But he is always remains faithful to the Lord. It's just within him. And so perhaps it's his time that he's spent in the fields with the sheep, and he's spent time, meditating on the word and meditating on the promises of God, meditating on the stories that have already happened and the miracles that God has already performed and the majesty and the covenant of which God has instilled with the Israelite people. And much like Caleb and Joshua that we talked about in previous episodes, he knew and understood the strength of the God that he serves. And so David is just taken aback by hearing this giant come out and threaten the army of God. He's like, who is this guy? Like, he would even dare to say it. What is wrong with all of you? I think what was going on in his head, like, what? Why are you all scared? Did you all forget that we serve God? Like, that he will take care of us? Did you all forget your covenant promise? Like, how dare he? How is he able to get away with this? Like, he's just full of like this righteous indignation, and it is righteous. He is just confident. And he also hears about the reward. And there's two parts to the reward. The victor here would get to marry the king's daughter, which makes you part of the royal household. And also your father's house is free from tax for life, which is, obviously we all know tax is a huge burden. So free from tax for life is good. Don't miss what happens next, because I think that's how we can relate so much to this story. Because while David's asking these questions of like, paint me a better picture. Am I fully understanding what's really happening here? Like, is all this, am I getting this right? And the people around him are confirming that this is in fact true. And his brother gives him crap immediately. And I don't want you to miss that, because I think there's a lot of us that can relate to, like, your family didn't see the value in you, right? Or the people around you are closest to you, or that you would think are the ones who's going to love and support you, are not always your biggest supporters in the beginning. And so, his brother comes out, and what he says immediately to him, what are you even doing here anyway? What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and deceit. You just want to see battle. Every one of these sentences is an attack on David's character, on David's identity, on his perspective, and it rings into every one of, I'm sure, these insecurities that he would have to be battling. Because as I told you, friends, we didn't read it. I summarized it. Please read it for yourself. If you go back just one chapter, when Samuel visits the house and he wants to anoint Jesse's sons, they don't even call David out from the field. So we know that he is not valued with the same as everyone else. He is like the least of these, right? He is out in the fields and not considered. And here we see it again when the brother right away is like, what are you doing here anyway? You also meaning, pay attention, friends, because I know it's going to resonate with some of you. You don't belong here. What are you doing here anyway? You don't even have a place here. What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? Also belittling, what about that little thing that you do? Because that's all you're good for. Why aren't you taking care of the one thing that you're supposed to be taking care of, which, by the way, is menial? He's sending a strong, each line is just this, dagger of things. And then he says, I know about your pride and your deceit. And I got to tell you, friends, as we're reading through the story of David, this line makes a lot more sense if you kind of know the story and you're going back and you're picking it apart like we're trying to do today. Because David is not prideful and David is not deceitful. These are not true characteristics of his qualities. This isn't reflective of who he is. So this is words being thrown at him by his oldest brother, which even understand, like, you're always, like, your family is your family. You always want love from your family. But the oldest brother would be, especially in this day and time, have like a higher place in the hierarchy of the family. Like you would want his respect even more, right? Like he would just be, it would hurt more coming from him, right? It would just be even harder. So for him to call you out on things that aren't even true, like I know about your pride and your deceit. You just want to see battle. None of that is true about David's heart and character. He's not just like, oh, I'm just here to see the gore and the good stuff. That's not who he is. He's not a prideful or deceitful person. He never reflects that. Well, there's a few mistakes he'll make in a few years that will show some deceit. But in any case, at this point, that's not the case. And it's not genuine to his character. It's a mistake he makes along the way. So it's not like something that he actually regularly battles with. Like some people really battle with pridefulness, and that's just not, I'm just trying to get you the real picture here and understand that these words being thrown at David in these sentences by his brother, by someone who's supposed to love him, is not accurate words. It's not true. And it's all meant to cut him down and make him feel. And I want you to know also, I want you to remember, we already talked about it a few times here, Eliab, his oldest brother, was present when Samuel chose to anoint him out of all the brothers. So he knows. So there's probably, I would guess, some significant jealousy already. Just that disdain. It might not have any reason. Sometimes people are just cruel for no real good reason, or just if they make a decision about who you are, but they don't know you. And that can be true even for the people closest to us. They make decisions about your character. And then you find out later, like, oh, they never really knew me, even though they technically knew me for like my whole life, because this is David's older brother, so knew him his whole life. But clearly doesn't know David well and doesn't see the value in him at all. And so I just think that's really important, because I think we can see what David does with that information. Like that's an attack on who he is from someone he loves. And David's reply even shows us his like used to it kind of response, because he's like, what have I done now? I was only asking a question. Like, why are you picking on? Why are you coming after me? So, I mean, you can tell that this is something he's just reflective of. And then the conversation stops. Other people keep talking about the conversation, but David stopped. That we don't hear more about it. Like this might have been pretty deflating. I'm reading into it. I can't say that that's the definite, but it just kind of stops. But David, the fact that he asked that question in that way, that was his response, is that who is this pagan Philistine that even dares defy the armies of the Lord? Why are you guys even afraid? Like, what is going on here? His response and his asking that question reaches King Saul, and Saul says, send me that guy, because he's different. He's different from my entire army who's just standing around terrified and complaining. This guy had a different response, and I got to meet him. I got to see who this is. And so we're on verse 32. And David goes to is in front of King Saul, and he says, don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go fight him. Now remember, he's a young shepherd boy. He's not a military person, so it's kind of funny. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's a man of war since his youth. But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by its jaw and club it to death. I have done this on both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. I think that's so funny too, that Saul was like, all right, you made a good case. Go ahead. Like, he's still a young boy, but that is showing the confidence that David had and the anointing that God had on him. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, but I want to we're going to talk about it right now. It is important because it shows us a lot about who David has been. He's just shared this incredible story, like in passing. Like, well, I used to take care of my father's sheep, and I encountered a lion and a bear, and they've tried to hurt my flock, and I've protected them. And then if the animal turned on me, I took it out, and I won. I am a young boy who has already defeated a lion and a bear with my bare hands. I mean, let's think about that, friends. We're afraid to let our children play outside in today's culture. We're afraid of just everything. And here's a young boy who has actually had something that really warrants being afraid of, like a lion, a hungry lion and a hungry bear who came after the sheep. And David has already championed them. And I've got to tell you, this is character building. When those things were happening, however much time has passed, right? Like when David faced a bear, when David faced a lion, it was building his faith. It was building his resilience and reliance and trust in God because he had victory in these really incredible situations. Like, let's just ponder this for a minute, friends. David, as a young boy, tending sheep, encountered wild, vicious animals, hungry, wild, vicious animals, and he defeated them. And it has given him incredible confidence for what he is capable of through the Lord. David has spent a lot of time shepherding is kind of a lonely job. And he is always depicted as like playing instruments in the fields or reading or what have you. And he has spent a lot of time just meditating on the Lord. And it has built his confidence in who he is. He writes so many of the Psalms, and he says, I have hidden the word in my heart, right? Your word is a lamp and to my feet, like you direct my path. Like there's so many good, one-liners that we have that's faith encouraging that comes from the Psalms of David, because he was so infatuated with the word and the promises of God, with the covenant that God made with Israel. And he knew that that meant him. He knew that he was part of that covenant. He understood the strength and power and faithfulness of God, to the point that he did not have fear in things that made a lot of sense for him to be afraid of, like a lion and a bear and a giant and an army who wants to defeat them all. And David just wasn't wavered by that, because he remembered what God has already done. He hides the word in his heart. He meditates on the promises and miracles of God from the past, from the days of wandering the desert. He spent time understanding the stories that we've been going through the last several episodes. He understood what God had done for the Israelites as they wandered in the wilderness. He understood and knew the stories of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. He knew the covenant promise that God had made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he understood his value to God. He could call those things into remembrance. Friends, that's why we do this. That's why I say, girl, read your Bible, because when you really know the stories, when you really understand the power and promises of God, it will encourage and strengthen your faith to a point that seems ridiculous, because David was able to remember and recall all the victories of the past for his people and for himself. And it gave him incredible, ridiculous strength. And that's what we should have too. That is one of the reasons I love this story. So I don't want you to miss a beat, but we have to keep reading because there's more. Then Saul gave David, we're on verse 38. Then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped the sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. I can't go in these, he protested to Saul. I'm not used to them. So David took them off again. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into his shepherd's bag. Then, armed with only his shepherd's staff and a sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. And pause, because now we've got another really valuable takeaway. Maybe one of the more important, I don't know, every takeaway is important. But this one I really want you to see. Saul says, okay, go ahead. You've convinced us. You're recalling the stories of faith. Your faith is incredible and you are ready to fight this giant. We have no one else to do it. And your perspective is different than my entire army. So I'm going to trust you. Go for it. And with my blessing and with my armor, because Saul's trying to do a nice thing here and say, okay, I want you prepared for this battle. And I will give you my best stuff so that you will be prepared. And he puts on Saul's armor. And that's supposed to seem like some type of blessing. But David puts it on and says, this isn't right. I'm not used to this. This isn't mine. Oh, friends, don't miss that. Don't miss that. You can't wear someone else's armor to the battle that God has given you. You don't have to look like someone else. You don't have to become someone else. You don't have to wear what you're supposed to in this instance, like putting this on. It doesn't have to look like what everyone else thinks it should. He's going off into battle, so putting on armor makes the most sense. And David said, this doesn't feel right. This isn't me. Friends, take away with that. Like, don't miss that. Hold on to that. Meditate on what that means for your own life. Don't put on someone else's armor to fight the battle you're called to, that's going to set you on the path of your destiny. This battle is going to set David up for the rest of his life. This is going to be the telltale sign. This is just going to put everything into motion. This is a big deal. That's why we still talk about it. This is a really big deal. This is a special, important thing. And David makes all the right choices here. He's not convinced by Saul or anyone else. I mean, this is the king. This is the most highest guy in the land who's saying, here you go. I'm being a blessing to you. Make sure you wear my own armor. This is one more reason that we can see that David was in fact not prideful, because to walk out in the king's own armor, that would be kind of a big deal. I'm kind of a big deal. The king picked me to do this. He knows I can do it. David was like, no, doesn't feel right. This isn't me. I've never worn anything like this before. I don't need your armor. I don't need your style. I don't need what you think I need. It's between me and God. I've got this. I've got this. And even better is that he takes it off, and then he only has his shepherd's bag and his shepherd's staff. He goes to a stream and picks up 5 smooth stones. And we're not even going to get into all that because there's more to that story and why that's significant. But he has his shepherd's bag and his shepherd's staff because he was being who he is. He was walking in his identity. And there's so much foreshadowing with that because Jesus tells us, I am the good shepherd. Like, there's a lot with shepherding, right? And so David is wearing his clothes. He's being who he was designed to be. He's walking in his anointing and calling. He's walking in his destiny, and he's not trying to take on any other persona. Wow, there's a lot we can get from imposter syndrome there. because David said, no, I'm good. And I think it's just really important that the scripture makes out to point out to us that he has his shepherd's bag and his shepherd's staff, because he is still just a shepherd. He is still just a boy. He did not come in new armor. He wasn't trying to be someone else. He was true to himself and his faith in who God says he is and what he can do. He remembered and he stayed true to himself. Well, let's keep reading because it gets even better. Verse 41, Goliath walked out toward David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at this ruddy-faced boy. Am I a dog, he roared at David, that you would come at me with a stick? And he cursed David by the names of his gods. Come over here and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. I mean, this is kind of spitting, really, this young boy walking out on the field is kind of spitting in Goliath's face, right? Like he's waiting for this battle and they send out a shepherd boy. So he's like very, he's got a lot to say about that. That's unkind. David replies to the Philistine, this is a really popular scripture, so this is another one you should commit to memory here. Verse 45, you come to me with a sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head, and then I will give your body to these men. I'm so sorry. Then I will give your body to these men. Then David replied to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head, and then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with a sword and a spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. I mean, those are declaring words. Those exude the confidence of God, and that is what makes David so special and so unique and so different from the vast army of Israelites standing around in terror. He is so confident in his identity and in the promises of God. It is absolutely incredible. He is declaring that this battle belongs to the Lord. This isn't even about me. And I don't even need to bring weapons, these fancy schmancy weapons and armor like you have, because I serve the God of heaven's armies, and you have defied him. How dare you? He is going to give you to us, and it's going to be devastating for your people. I mean, he paints a pretty nasty picture. He's pretty on point with his adjectives there of like what all is going to happen. And I love that. I love his confidence and his declaration. He is not afraid to declare what the Lord is going to do. I think that is so exciting when you're reading this story, when you're seeing the things and just picturing this. I mean, just use your imagination for a minute, friends. Close your eyes and picture this young boy who's going to be what, like 5 foot tall, right? maybe 6. I don't think so, but like, let's pretend best case scenario, he's 6 feet tall, which again, I'm highly doubting. And here we have Goliath, which tells us is 9 feet tall. And so just picturing this 3 feet of difference, this giant fighting man and this little boy. And he's like, we're going to beat you. You're not a big deal. Like, it's just a hilarious picture. You've seen it on cartoons. I'm just saying, like, remember, friends, even though we see things sometimes drawn out for us in the imagery, these are real people. Like, this was a person who really lived. This is a historical thing. Like, wow, that's just so incredible. I think one of the things that we really get from David right here is he completely released control. He wasn't like, I've got this. He's never prideful. It's never about David. He's always like, you mess with the wrong God, the only God, the real God. And you guys are ridiculous. And we're going to take care of this right now. And you should remember too, because this is also their past, right? They've seen these miracles happen. They've seen all the successes of Israel over the years, and they've seen the back and forth. And he's like, how dare you come at us? Don't you remember how God always comes through for us? This incredible declaration by David shows how he is confident that the battle belongs to the Lord. His perspective is that it's not our problem, right? His perspective is seeing how big God is, not how big the problem is. I mean, that's the real good takeaway there, right? It's never about the giant you're facing. It's about the God you serve. Isn't that incredible that this young boy knew this from his experiences, from his ability to meditate on the word and understand the promises? Don't miss the value of David and how it can impact your life and your heart. Your perspective matters more than your problem. David, that's what's the point I was trying to make. I hope I didn't skim over it here. Your problem can be really big. David's problem, the Israelite problem, really big giant, legitimate problem, terrifying problem. The prospects of being conquered and killed and turned into slaves and whatever the case was, whatever the consequences of this war could be, really terrifying, scary stuff. It was a genuine, huge problem. I don't want to take away from that. But David's perspective was that the battle belongs to the Lord. I know my promises. I know who I am. He walked forward in confident obedience and faith in God. David didn't stand there, cross his arms, and wait for God to strike Goliath with a lightning bolt, even though he said, God is going to give you to us. That could have been his perspective, like, okay, God, go ahead. Where you at? Sometimes we do that. Sometimes we totally do that. That's not what David did. He walked forward in faith. He knew, and then his steps followed his faith. Like, he not only said that he believed all that, he wasn't just strong and confident as he stood in the face of the giant. He continued to take steps. I myself might be being honest, right? Like, here's my vulnerable side. I might stand there and be all confident until I'm like standing in front of that giant and then be like, well, God's going to take care of it somehow. And just like kind of literally like that standing there waiting for lightning is a thought that's processed through my own mind. We're like, yeah, God could just strike him dead at any time. He could just fall over. I know that could happen. And it totally could, right? But that was never the point. That's not how we grow in our faith. That's how God takes care of things nice and neat for us. But there's no real victory in that, because it's also important that we have spiritual growth. And so David, with each step he takes toward Goliath, proves that he puts action behind his words. And so we'll keep reading. We don't want to miss it. Verse 48. As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. And the stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell on his face to the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone, for he had no sword. Then David ran over and pulled Goliath's sword from his sheath, and David used it to kill him and cut off his head. And then the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, and they turned and ran. And then the men of Israel and Judah gave a great shout of triumph and rushed after the Philistines, chasing them as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron. The bodies of the dead and the wounded Philistine were strewn along the road as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the Israelite army returned and plundered the deserted Philistine camp. So they got a lot of stuff. It's usually the spoils of war. As Saul watched David go out to fight the Philistine, he asked Abner, the commander of his army, "Abner, whose son is this young man?" "I don't really know," Abner declared. "Well, find out who he is," the king told him. And as soon as David returned from killing Goliath, Abner brought him to Saul with the Philistine's head still in his hand. "Tell me about your father, young man," Saul said. And David replied, "His name is Jesse, and we live in Bethlehem." And I think that one of the reasons, I think I said this already, I'm sorry if I am repeating myself, one of the things that was appealing to David and why that's in there at the end like that, because one of the rewards was that your father's house would be taxed free forever, like no more tax for your family. And I already pointed out to you numerous times that David was the least in his family. He was not thought of. He was not cared about and respected. And I think that reward was super appealing to him because it was a way that his father would notice him. That's me reading between the lines. But also because it brought it up at the end, like that was God's way of making sure Saul thought about that and talked to David about that. Who is your father? And he tells him, and he can't wait for his dad to know that he's done something worthwhile. David was always worthwhile, friends. He was always worthwhile to God. He always had the right, pure heart. He always had incredible, courageous faith. He was in training from young, very much younger, because he had faced a lion and a bear. He was in training to do great things, and his family didn't recognize that. The people around him, the people who were supposed to love him and support him and nurture him and all the things, they didn't see it. And he saw this as a way to show up in their eyes, to have some sort of favor from his family, because you always still want that, right? We do. No matter what we say, we always still want that. And I think that that was an incredible thing that I believe that God brought that back to Saul's mind of like, remember the blessings and the gifts that David's supposed to get now. And David could have that reward that it was remembered, it was honored, and that his family would likely eventually rejoice with him and be proud of him. I think that was a huge, compelling factor for David, in my opinion, based on the things that we see throughout the journey of his life. And so I know that this is like technically a short story that we can wrap up in literally like 90 seconds. We could have just explained what happened, but then you would miss all the takeaways. We know the story of David and Goliath. It's a quick, easy story. But when you really stop to examine it, there are so many ways and so many things to see to help you grow. And I want to ask you guys, what giant is standing in front of you today? What have you been focusing on? Are you focusing on the obstacle in front of you, the challenge, the problem, how to solve that problem? Or are you focusing on God's faithfulness? And I'm guilty of this too, and I'm trying to get better at it. So that's probably why this was an important story for me today. And I got to tell you, one of the tools and resources that I use is simply journaling. And it's such a simple action that's so easy to do. And if we would just take the time to do it, it improves your life. Write it down, friends, so that you can remember, like David did. God has answered prayers. God has shown up in your life. God has shown up for other people. He's shown up for you. He's shown up for, worldwide. He's shown up in the Bible. Write it all down wherever it's going to give you faith to draw from. When you write down the things that God has done and how he's shown up in your life and the life, when you've seen it, any testimony, anything that you've seen that you're like, wow, God, that amazed me, write it down and read it often. If you write it down, if you commit to writing 3 things down a day, write 3 things down a week, and then every day read over those things that God has done, the amazingness, the testimonies, the promises answered, the prayers answered, just this little things, the God winks, the green lights, like just any little thing. It doesn't matter how small, it's going to continue to grow your faith, which is the most important part of our spiritual growth, that we continue to trust God, that we are not like Israel, where we go back and forth and say, oh, we forgot about God. We forgot. And we're going over here to do our own thing. Like, no, be strong and courageous like David, and know that no matter how ridiculous it looks, your problem is really just not your problem. God will take care of it as he has promised. And so, that's my tip for you. Make sure you get that journal, write that stuff down, read it daily. It is going to help you grow in your faith. I promise. That's a promise for me. Okay. And so I hope that you enjoyed this reflection on this time together, discovering all the benefits of the story of David and Goliath. And I hope that you will read all the things that we skipped over, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. You want to read all of the book of 1 Samuel. Really, you want to read, all of the whole Bible. So good luck with that. It'll do a little at a time, but make sure that you're taking time to really pay attention to the stories, because it's more than just reading, friends. The Bible is a book that's meant to be studied so that we can learn and grow from each chapter and each verse. There's so much good stuff to help us make our lives better. Until next time, girl, read your Bible.